from the studios of Hub Radio Phoenix, it's the Jay Lawrence Show. Now, here's Jay.
Are going down. People are distracted by crazy things like critical race theory and bilingual education. And
let's talk about critical race theory.
Yes.
I think it's important. Would you explain it and all that's wrong?
Okay, well, I've been fighting critical race theory actually for almost 20 years. Most people have learned about it in the last year or so. And when I was superintendent of schools from 2003 to 2011, the Tucson Unified District had a program called Ethnic Studies.
And we're going to talk about that. What you did then was the most dramatic move that I remember.
Well, let me tell you what they did.
Okay.
They divided students by race. If you were white, you went to classroom 1, African American classroom 2, Native American classroom 3, Mexican American classroom 4. They called it Raza Studies, which means the race in Spanish. And part of their curriculum was critical race theory. And I'm the worst enemy that critical race theory has, because I've actually read the whole curriculum.
Right.
I could demand it from the schools when I was superintendent of schools. And let me read to you well, let me first tell you what happened. I wrote a bill to put a stop to it. And it took a couple of years to get it through the legislature.
You were so booed when you went to Tucson. They couldn't stand the fact, A, that you knew what it was all about, and B, that you wanted to end it.
Well, I used to have to wear a bulletproof vest when I went to Tucson, because they let the kids out of the high school, and there were big mobs looking for me down there. And they actually had a street play called The Killing of Tom Horne.
Oh.
And there was somebody wore a mask that was my picture, and in the play, at the end of the play, they kill him. So I got the bill through the legislature. It took effect my last day as superintendent of schools. So first thing that morning, I held a meeting with myself, and I declared them to be in violation of that statute.
Right.
Then that afternoon, I went over to be sworn in as Attorney General, and as Attorney General, I enforced it. And we reached the point where they were going to have their funds cut off. So by a 4-to-1 vote, they eliminated the program of ethnic studies. Part of that curriculum was critical race theory. And
let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
What I remember most was that they were teaching in class anti-American education. They were teaching revolution against America, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, they had, some of the teachers had pictures of
Right.
the revolutionary, Cuban revolutionary on their wall. And so here's the quotation from their curriculum of critical race theory within ethnic studies. And this is from at least 11 years ago, a little more. A part of the critical race theory is defined by the materials taught to the students as follows. Unlike traditional civil rights, which embraces incrementalism and step-by-step progress, critical race theory questions the very foundation of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law.
What does that mean, Tom, in non-legal terms?
Well, Enlightenment rationalism is, during the Enlightenment, 18th century, the time that our Constitution was written, people were starting to use logic. Instead of relying completely on biblical authority, they were starting to use logic and science and reasoning. It was the development of what we think of, it's fundamental now to our civilization, that we respect science and we respect logic and we respect evidence and we respect reasoning and we respect individual autonomy. The individual is not just a cog in the machine of the country, but the individual is what really counts. They're saying they're against that. They're teaching the kids to be against Enlightenment rationalism. They were teaching the kids to be against, it was neutral principles of constitutional law. Constitutional law says, under the 14th Amendment, all people are equal. and you cannot discriminate against people based on race.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. One of the things that I remember you were very much involved in was teaching Constitution and Americanism in classes, social studies. They weren't there, and you fought for that.
Yeah, I pushed hard on teaching more history as well, Jay.
Yes.
Can I tell you a little bit about my own biography? That's a
Sure.
reason for that. My parents were Jewish people living in Warsaw, Poland in the 1930s. And my dad did not go to college, but he loved reading history. And that made him a good interpreter of current events. So he predicted the Nazi invasion of Poland. And he he decided to leave. He told all his friends to leave. No one would listen to him. Even my mother, my older sister was already born in Poland. My mother did not want to leave. But in those days, husbands had more authority over their wives than they do now. And
Carmen, remember he said that. I've known Carmen for a long time.
He made them leave. He made his wife leave, along with their daughter. And they couldn't get into the United States, so they went to Canada. And they stayed in Canada from 1936 to 1949, about 13 years, until they could come to the United States legally. And I was already born in Canada, and then I was naturalized as an American citizen. And my family survived because my father read history, and he could interpret current events. And I believe the survival of the younger generation will depend on their ability to read history and therefore understand current events. And therefore I pushed hard for teaching history in the schools.
They don't get that in the schools as much as they should. I know when I was a legislator, we had bills like that come up all the time. And I know we worked for it. And you were the main reason. As superintendent of public instruction, you did some amazing things. Nutrition. Nobody ever thought of that before. You did.
Yeah, well, I went around giving speeches with a pyramid of sugar that was in every Coca-Cola. I said, don't drink Coca-Cola because you get all this sugar. The left-wing Arizona Star in Tucson, they said I should focus on academics rather than nutrition. Well, you can, if you're a reasonable person, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I could still work on academics and still push for good nutrition in the schools.
You know, we didn't cover your background at all, and as a Harvard law graduate, I think it's important to cover the first steps that I didn't cover when you first came in. And I think your background is so outstanding that we must cover it.
Okay. Well, I graduated from Harvard College magna cum laude, and then I graduated from the Harvard Law School with honors, and then I came out here and started practicing law.
When you ran for the legislature, I recall that. Do you recall any accomplishments as a legislator?
Yes. I had been involved in all kinds of litigation, and one of it was family law. And I noticed that sometimes when a couple was getting divorced, you had a history where the man was dominating the assets and the woman didn't know what they were and didn't have any access to any bank accounts. And so the husband had an advantage in not only in getting a good lawyer, but also in doing things for the kids, so the kids would want to be with him. So I got a bill passed, took again a couple of years to get it passed, that said the liquid assets, money, stocks, bonds, and so on, would be divided in the beginning of the divorce rather than afterwards, so that the women would be on an equal level going through the divorce process.
Our guest is Tom Horne. Notice I have the bumper sticker. Tom is running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. And if anyone is qualified for that, it's Tom Horne, who served as Superintendent of Public Instruction. One of the things that you really worked for, the importance of kindergarten, the importance of a full day kindergarten.
Yeah.
Talk about that, Tom.
Well, there are lots of studies that showed that the brain develops most quickly when the kids are very young. And these studies showed that if you have all-day kindergarten, they would do better later on. And the business community was very much in favor of it. So I became an advocate at the legislature for it, and it passed. Later on...
You mean we did something right?
We did a lot of things right, yeah. Later on, when the state went through economic difficulties, especially after 2008 recession, they eliminated that. But I think it was an important achievement. I hope we can do it again.
What do we do right and wrong in testing in our schools today, and how can you make changes that are necessary?
Okay. Well, testing is necessary as a doctor taking your blood pressure. You have to know where you are. And testing, especially at the end of the year, to see how well students are doing, tells us whether the schools are succeeding or whether they're failing. So we implemented, first of all, testing, and then if the district was not doing well, we would send out a team to help them do better. And if that didn't work, we would take them over. We had the power to take over a district, so the schools didn't report to their school board, they reported to the State Department of Education because they were failing. For example, the Roosevelt School District is a very large poor school district, and they had terrible test scores. And we brought it to the point, we tried to help them at first, it wasn't working, so we brought them to the point of a hearing to take them over, and that got their attention, and they focused on academics, and their test scores went way up. And after I left, they stopped doing that. They stopped helping, and they stopped having the stick of saying, we'll take over if you don't do better with your education, as reflected by the test scores. So part of my platform is to bring that back. If anyone is interested in my platform, it's on electtomhorne.com, 2 T's in the middle, electtomhorne.com. And my advisor, who's a nationally known political advisor, was angry at me because he said I put more detail about my plans in there than 99% of governor candidates and Senate candidates, and no one's going to want to read all that. And I said, that may be, but I think people are entitled to know what I stand for and what I'll do if elected. And so all the details are there, but it starts with a summary, so you don't have to read the whole thing if you don't want to.
You know, what's interesting is that so many people will say that the arts are of no value. Dump them and do math. Can you do both?
Not only can you do both, but there are a lot of studies that show that kids who start doing music do much better in math later on. And there are 2 possible explanations for that. One is that you're using both sides of your brain. You're using the right side of your brain as you do music, and that helps then later on with math. The other possibility is that when you learn to read music, you learn to pay attention to more than one thing at a time. There are different lines, and you have to follow them all. And that develops the students' malleable minds when they're young, so that later on they do much better at math. So I become an advocate of something called STEAM. You've heard of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Well, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. So I'm trying to change the focus on STEM to a focus on STEAM.
You are a piano player. You are a musician, and I've heard you do concert music on piano. So you're not speaking from I'm way out there point of view.
Yeah, I've soloed with several orchestras, actually, playing the piano.
Let's take a very quick break. This is Tom Horne. Tom Horne hopefully will be the next superintendent of public instruction, and I'm Jay Lawrence. I'm glad you're here.
You're watching Jay Lawrence on Hub Radio Phoenix.
I am so glad it's nice music, isn't it?
Yeah.
I am so glad you're here with us. Tom Horne is our guest, running for superintendent of public instruction. Tom, critical race theory, I wish you would elaborate on that. It is so important. Critical race theory is coming up, and people are being asked to vote yes on undoing all that we know about America and equality.
Well, if I were a voter and deciding who I wanted to vote for superintendent of schools, I would want to know who's the most qualified to destroy critical race theory. And that's not to be immodest, but that's myself.
Yes.
Because I did it once, and I know how to do it again. The people who who ran ethnic studies, which was a type of critical race theory, and included it in their curriculum. They call themselves neo-Marxists. What that means is this: Marxists believe that all history is understood as class struggle, and you don't have to study anything else. It's a distorted view of history, the oppressors and the oppressed, rich and poor. Neo-Marxists have the same philosophy, but instead of class or economics, rich or poor, it's all about race. So they say the oppressors are the white race and the oppressed are the others, and if you want to study history, that's all you need to know is the struggle against oppression on the basis of race.
We're going through a very weird time in America right now, in that race has become so important. And anti-white, there are classes where they actually try to teach you that because you're white, you have something going against you. I can't believe that.
Well, there's a reporter, investigative reporter, who studied these. He's found over 1,000 examples. And as early as third grade, they have the kids classify themselves. What race are they? Where do they stand on the oppression spectrum? Are you an oppressor or are you oppressed? Well, if you teach kids that they're oppressed, why should they try? The system's against them. We should teach our kids. The United States of America has more opportunity than any country in the world, and if they work hard, they can do anything they want. But if you teach them they're oppressed, then system's rigged against you, why try? On the other hand, the kids that are supposedly the oppressors, they're supposed to feel guilty 24 hours a day. It's a very destructive, ugly philosophy, and it's spreading like wildfire through the schools right now. And that's why I decided to run for superintendent of schools rather than a different office, because we've got to put a stop to that. We have to do better academically and not have these distractions. China is first in the world on the math tests. The United States is 25th. And if we don't do something fast, then when the future comes, China will be the world power, and the United States will be like Ghana is today. So it's urgent that we do something to eliminate these distractions and to get the focus back on academics.
Legislators, I don't think, understand this. I think there are too many examples of legislators who go along with the critical race theory. What would you do as superintendent to fight this encroachment, this unreal attitude toward race?
Well, I think there are two paths you could take. The first is what I did last time. We had a Republican majority in the legislature. When we passed a bill to put a stop to it, you couldn't teach kids, you couldn't divide them by race. You couldn't teach them to resent people of different races. You couldn't teach them to be ethnic chauvinists, which it's really racial essentialism. I have a fundamental belief that we're all individuals, and what matters is what we know and what we can do, and not what race we were born into. And I think that's a fundamental American principle, and they're teaching the opposite. If you look at the current super...
Let me interrupt you for a second. Do you see a sign that says, "Don't tap on table"?
I'm sorry.
I want to point out that you're not just happy, you're banging.
Well, I'm passionate about it.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So we have to teach kids to treat each other as individuals and not pay attention to what race they are. What they're teaching is exactly the opposite. They want them to identify what race they are. In fact, if you go on the website of the current superintendent, Catherine Hoffman, and you go to social and emotional learning, which is really just which is another distraction, and it's just really a front for critical race theory. And you look at the first video, and they have somebody talking, how do we teach social emotional learning? And they have a guy saying, the first thing we have to teach them is to have them be emotionally healthy is who they are. So we teach them about their race and about their gender. Well, that's not who they are. Who they are is that they're an individual. And so this is a way of racializing people, racial chauvinism, racial essentialism, and we have to stop it, because the whole fundamental part of American philosophy is we're all individuals, and it doesn't matter what our race is, where we're from, What matters is what we know and what we can do.
Tom, how many more things can you find that are wrong with today's educational system in the state of Arizona? How do we compare, for example, with other states?
Not well. Now, when I left office, if you adjust it for demographics, we were about in the middle. I think now we're really toward the bottom, and it's easy to predict that because if you distract people, I'll give you an example. They found somebody who was not able to read and write, so they went back to try to figure out how it happened. Well, his high school teacher was teaching critical race theory all the time. So they're not teaching the kids the academics they need to succeed, and for our country to succeed with people doing that. They're distracted by these left-wing ideologies, and so we're graduating kids that are illiterate. Now, this is another thing in my platform. When I took office back in 2003, the legislature had passed a bill that said, in order to graduate from high school, you had to pass a statewide test.
Yes.
And they did that because kids were graduating not able to read and write or do math, and so the diploma didn't mean anything. So it passed the legislature, but it wasn't being enforced. I was the first one to enforce it.
I was amazed. By the way, I introduced that bill. That was a bill that I introduced, and then it was introduced by another legislator, and they said, we'll go with that one. So I was very much for it, but it wasn't my bill, though I had one that said that.
It would have been much better if it was your bill, Jim. So
why do I like Tom Horne? let me count the ways.
So the point of it is, and so I want to bring back that requirement, because one of my daughters was a teacher at the time, and kids weren't doing their homework. Parents came in, she would say, your student has to pass the Ames test at that time, which was our statewide test at the time. Your student has to pass the Ames test, or they'll get no high school diploma. They've got to study. And it was a great incentive for the parents to make sure that the kids studied.
What happened to Ames?
They changed the name of it, and they've changed it a couple of times since. I will tell you, Jay, that I'm the only superintendent in the history that people know that didn't change the test when he took office. Everybody wants to have their own test. It's kind of an ego thing.
Right.
But the Ames test was started before I got there by Lisa Graham Keegan, and I kept it because I think continuity is important. If you keep changing things, the teachers don't know what they're supposed to do. They learn one thing and all of a sudden they're changing it to something else. I said, the way to have improvement, with school improvement or any other kind of improvement, is to keep what is good and then improve on it, rather than change the whole thing and have to have people start all over again. So I kept the Ames test. Then after I was no longer in office, they started calling it something else again.
I happen to like Lisa Graham Keegan.
Yeah.
I think she had an important role to play in the education in Arizona.
Well, she was very important in school choice. And school choice is a big thing to me. When I was in the legislature, this was back around 1999, I was the chairman of a conference committee on what's called the Education Omnibus Bill, where they put a lot of things in one bill. And the Senate had a provision in there that limited the growth of charter schools. The House didn't have that. So I killed that limit. And as a result, our charter schools grew faster than any state in the nation. When I left office, we had 10% of our kids in charter schools. The second most was Florida with 7%. So we led the nation in school choice. And that gives a lot of choice to parents. It provides schools that can meet kids' needs. I was serving at the time as a school board member. And there's some parents you just couldn't please. They'd keep complaining. And so when they'd keep complaining, I'd say to them, you can send your kid to a charter school. The state pays for it. And maybe you'll be more satisfied there. And they were happier, and I was happier because they weren't complaining so much.
The percentage of children in charter schools is far above what it was then. It is a large part of our education system in Arizona. Private schools are important also.
Yeah. Well, I immodestly think that I'm responsible for us not having a limit on charter schools. You may have seen a movie. There was a movie that went around, In New York City, the charter schools were limited. Everybody wanted to get their children into these charter schools that had a good academic record, and they had to do it by lottery. So you had like a 1 in 6 chance of getting into one of these schools. And they showed when they were picking the lottery, everybody was so nervous and crying and all kinds of emotion. They wanted to win the lottery. In Arizona, you don't have to worry about a lottery. Charter schools can grow just as fast as people want them to.
Our guest is Tom Horne. Tom is candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. I won't cover the T. There, hold it by the corner. And I'm glad you're here tonight. Thank you all. This is the Jay Lawrence Show. We've got so much more coming up with Tom. We're going to take a look at all of the things that are part of his political campaign, all straight ahead.
You're watching Jay Lawrence on Hub Radio Phoenix.
Our guest is candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Horne. I am very glad to welcome Tom. He and I have spent a lot of time campaigning for many offices, and this one is so important. He's been there before. What are some of the other things? How about bilingual education, Tom?
Yes, well, one of my achievements, I talked about destroying the ethnic studies in Tucson. Another of my achievements was I destroyed bilingual education. There was an initiative passed to say that students should be in structured English immersion, which is a better way, much better way to learn English than bilingual education is. And again, it wasn't enforced. It doesn't do any good to pass a law unless it's enforced. So I was the first one to enforce that. When I took office, Lisa Graham Keegan reported to the legislature with bilingual education that about 9% of students who were in bilingual education became proficient in English within 1 year. That's pathetically low. At that rate, you would almost have nobody becoming proficient in English by the time they graduate. When we put in structured English immersion, it went up to 29%. So within 4 or 5 years, almost everybody would become proficient in English. And in fact, we have Johanna Haver here with us, who wrote the book where I got a lot of this information. So it's very important. Kids cannot succeed in our society if they don't know English. So why would, and there's a big effort to bring back bilingual education. The current superintendent, Catherine Hoffman, wants to do it. And the legislature almost passed it this year, Jay. It got majorities at different times in the House and Senate. It never made it through, all the way through, thankfully. But we're in danger of them bringing back bilingual education. And with what's happening at the border now, this is going to become a much, much bigger problem for us. And we've got to, if these kids are going to be here, we've got to be sure they learn English, and they need to learn in structured English immersion. There was a what we call a meta study that was done in a magazine called Education Next. It's sponsored by Harvard and Stanford Education Research. And it found that students that were in structured English immersion outperformed students in bilingual education in every way they mattered. Graduation rate, grades, entrance into high status professions by almost 2 to 1. The English immersion kids had it over the bilingual kids. So we've got to, be on the side of our students and make sure that they learn English, and on the side of our state to make sure we don't get a group of people who can't speak English in our state. Because if you ask the question, who benefits from bilingual education, it's the radical leaders that want to keep that population separate so that they can manipulate them. And we can't let that happen.
We have a problem, Tom, a problem in Arizona at this moment. Our borders are wide open, and many of the people entering right now do not speak English.
Right.
How do we deal with that?
Well, with respect to the students who don't speak English, I've just covered that quite a bit. But let me say this, Jay. When I was Attorney General, I spent a lot of time at the border. And there are miles and miles of really good fencing. It bends toward Mexico. So if you try to climb over it, it bends so that you can't get over it. But then it stops. So if you want to come to this country illegally, you just walk around where it stops.
Right.
And that's crazy. You remember the Maginot Line? Yes. This was the line that France built to prevent an invasion from Germany. but they didn't build in Belgium because it was a neutral country. So the Germans invaded through Belgium. And my dad, who, as I told you, was very interested in history, always told me, a chain is no stronger than its weakest link. As long as that fence isn't finished, people can come over at will. And this is not a wall to keep people from escaping the way the Berlin Wall was. This is a wall to give us the ability to control immigration. We need legal immigration. Immigrants have outperformed people born here since like the mid-1850s in entrepreneurship and in Nobel Prizes, all kind of measures. But it has to be controlled. You can't have it uncontrolled that anybody, no matter what the numbers are, no matter who it is, can just come in by walking around the parts of the wall that have not been finished.
I'm going to get back to critical race theory because I think it's important. But before we do that, you spent years as Attorney General of this state. You went to the state Supreme Court. You went to the U.S. Supreme Court any number of times,
yes.
Probably more than almost any Attorney General in the history of the state.
I argued in every court I could. I argued in Arizona Superior Court, Arizona Court of Appeals, Arizona Supreme Court, Federal District Court, the Ninth Circuit, and the United States Supreme Court. And the reason I did that was I thought, you know, the Arizona Republic once editorialized that the job of the Attorney General is not so much legal, but it's administrative. I don't think that's true. I think the Attorney General has to be a role model for the other lawyers in the office, and he has to show a willingness to fight for the people of Arizona so that they'll have that as a model to do the same thing. So I argued a lot of cases.
What were some of the most important cases that you did argue? I know Supreme Court, you had a couple of victories.
Yes, one was, I had one involving capital punishment where somebody had committed a very brutal murder. And the family of the victim really wanted to get justice. And the Ninth Circuit, our liberal Ninth Circuit, had ruled that he couldn't get the death penalty because he had deteriorated mentally, and he couldn't help his lawyer in habeas corpus proceedings, which is a collateral attack on state decisions by federal courts. Well, I argued that he doesn't need to help them because they have to go on the record they have. They can't introduce new facts. So I argued that to the U.S. Supreme Court to overrule the Ninth Circuit, and they overruled the Ninth Circuit unanimously. I not only had the 5 conservatives, I had the 4 liberals. They all overruled the Ninth Circuit on this decision, and so the family felt they could get justice. I remember one bad weekend where I spoke on a Friday night to families where children had been killed brutally, and Saturday night to families of police officers who had been killed. And those people need justice. The delay in the Ninth Circuit at that time was about 18 or 19 years before capital punishment would be carried out. And some of them had been on a roller coaster. They thought capital punishment was coming for the guy who had brutally murdered their family member, and then there was for some reason it got postponed, and it was all up and down. And I pushed hard to compress that period and to be sure justice was done as long as we were certain the person was really guilty.
I believe there is a disrespect in our society today for law and order. There is a disrespect for the police officers. Is there a way that a superintendent of public instruction can change what's going on in the schools at this moment?
Yes. This is a very important issue to me because the war on police makes me absolutely furious. And people are learning. The crime rates have gone way up. And now all of a sudden, mayors in towns like Portland and Seattle and New York and Chicago are trying to hire more police officers after they said...
Cut the budgets.
After they said, yeah, defund the police. Now they're
Right.
finding out what the consequence of that is. So it really makes me angry. I really... There are some bad apples in any barrel. And when that happens, that they should be removed. And I have brought some major civil rights actions because of that. But overall, I view our police officers as heroes, and every time I pass one on the street, I stop and shake his hand and thank him. Now, what can the superintendent of schools do? What we need to do is lobby the legislature to to re-emphasize in the budget school police officers that are there in the school not only for safety, but also when they're there, the kids become friendly with them, and they learn you can trust a police officer.
Right.
And I think that would help change the attitude, because this objectifying of police officers as pigs and as the enemy, that can destroy our society. You have to have safety in order to have civilization.
Tom, what are some of the other things in your platform that you think are important that we really should cover?
Okay, let me give you one example. I never forgot this. A Chinese exchange student at ASU was quoted in the paper as saying, "You put 80% of your efforts into your bottom 20%, and we put 80% of our efforts into our top 20%. Who do you think is going to win that contest?" So what bothered me under No Child Left Behind was we have what I call proficiency obsession in our country. That is, all we care about is getting kids to proficiency. We have to bring kids to excellence. So when I was in the legislature, I got a bill passed that said that the Board of Regents should give a scholarship to any student who excels on 3 or more statewide tests, the Ames test at the time. Well, like everything else, it doesn't do any good to pass a bill if it's not implemented, and this was not implemented. When I became state superintendent of schools, I served on the Board of Regents. That's an automatic position. And so I lobbied the other members, and we implemented this scholarship. The scholarship served as a great incentive because it was objective. If you want to incentivize people, you have to have an objective standard. Subjective scholarships don't mean anything because nobody knows what the rules are. But this was an objective scholarship. And so kids were motivated, but especially parents were motivated to make sure their kids excel so that they'll get the scholarship and college will be free. Well, the university presidents didn't like it because they want to have the discretion,
Right.
Even though we were only 13% of their scholarships. So they were constantly lobbying to eliminate it. While I was on the Board of Regents, I constantly lobbied to keep it and succeeded in doing that. And we had met many people who went to school free because they excelled. Well, when I left, the presidents had their way and they eliminated this. We need to bring this back because we need to motivate students not just to be proficient, we need to motivate them to be excellent.
Is there a way to say, we have teachers today who have come up in a college system with teachers, professors like them. The professors, and I have seen at ASU, we have one group of conservative students and one conservative club in ASU, and the rest of the teaching to people who will become teachers is unfortunately left-wing.
It's so ridiculously bad, I think a lot of people wouldn't believe it. I read an article online by a professor at the ASU School of Education that said we shouldn't teach kids grammar because if they go home and they have good grammar and their parents don't, it'll hurt the view of the family thing. We emphasized when we did English immersion, we emphasized teaching the kids that didn't know good English grammar, and the school said we don't have the books to do that. We said we use the same books used with the English-speaking kids. We don't have any. It stopped teaching grammar. So it's ridiculously bad in the schools of education. And it's not just the schools of education, and it's not just teachers, but right now, among young people, I think, 20 to 30, something like that, they view socialism as good as capitalism. And the lesson of the 20th century is that socialism is a complete failure. And we had great experiments. We had East and West Germany, same country, same culture, same resources, and West Germany flourished and East Germany was in poverty. Same thing North and South Korea. Same people, same culture. Now the South Koreans outperform the North Koreans in their economy per person by an unbelievable 100 to 1. And it's almost the same situation that it was in Germany. But we don't teach them this history, we don't teach them these economics, and we have to start doing that so that we don't have citizens believing that socialism is a good way to go.
Our guest is Tom Horne, the candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction, a terrific candidate. I'm allowed editorials. I'm allowed them. This is a talk show. I'm Jay Lawrence. I'm glad you're here.
You're watching Jay Lawrence on Hub Radio Phoenix.
And I am so glad you're here tonight. Our guest, Tom Horne. I want to deal further with critical race theory, but first of all, the idea of firearms in our society. Tom, is there anything we can say to students that it's okay, that firearms are okay, and there is a way to be safe around them?
Well, it's good if people are around firearms, it's good for them to take courses on how to deal with them safely. But firearms are a way for law-abiding people to protect themselves. If you ban firearms, you won't take them away from the criminals. They'll always get them on the street. But if you take them away from law-abiding people, they can't defend themselves. And there are very interesting studies that show that in counties that have more firearms per person, they have much less crime. Because if you're a criminal, you don't want to try to rob houses where there are a lot of firearms. You want to try to rob them like in New York, where they try to prevent people from having firearms.
Tom, let's talk about the importance of parents in the education system. I know that's important to you.
It is, yeah. The current superintendent, I think, neglects that. She has her left-wing agenda, and she doesn't care what the parents think. But we have to pay attention to what parents want for their children. What do parents want for their children? I don't care what the ethnicity is. And I had a lot of support from the Hispanic community when I was fighting against bilingual education, when I was fighting against Raza studies. They wanted their kids to learn academics so they could succeed in the economy. Parents of all ethnicities, all backgrounds, they want their kids to have a good academic education. And that's really lacking now, and that's what I need to bring back to the schools.
We are studying this last election. There are so many criminal events tied to this last election. And we talk about a liberal superintendent of public instruction, Kathy Hoffman, who is as far left as you can go,
Yeah.
and you, who are a conservative. Are we going to see a legal election coming up? We would hope so.
Yeah, I think so. One of the U.S. Supreme Court cases I argued, that you mentioned earlier, is that we should be able to require that people prove their citizenship when they register to vote. We require you to show something that you are who you are when you go to vote, but we're lax in the registration. And so I argued, Arizona passed a bill saying you have to show proof of citizenship when you register to vote. And again, the liberal Ninth Circuit said that's unconstitutional, and I went to the U.S. Supreme Court with it. And on our state elections, we can require that your registration shows that when you registered, you proved your citizenship. On national elections, we can't because Congress.
Federal election, right?
Federal elections, we can't require it, but state elections, we can. Now, when we had a Democrat as the person who handled elections in Maricopa County, he wasn't requiring that. He was letting everybody vote in the state elections. But the law is that you can prevent. I mean, now we can again enforce the law that says if you want to vote in state elections, you have to prove when you register to vote that you are in fact a citizen.
Tom, I hate to be repetitious and harp on a particular subject, but critical race theory is so important today. And I know that you have some ways of facing critical race theory as a superintendent of public instruction.
Well, I'm pledged to destroy it. I destroyed it once. I'm pledged to destroy it again. But what I'd like to do is tell a little more about to your viewers about just how bad it is.
Sure.
So, as I had said earlier, I'm the worst enemy that they have because I've read their curriculum. They had a textbook that I read called Occupied America. Occupied America was a textbook. It sings the praises of a leader named Jose Angel Gutierrez, one of whose speeches is described in the textbook as follows: Gutierrez called upon Chicanos to kill the gringo.
That's exactly what you were facing in the Tucson Unified School District.
Yeah, and then the textbook goes on to say what he really meant was end white control over Mexicans. That's not what he said. He said kill the gringo. They like to change language. You know?
Right.
Another textbook gloated about the trouble the U.S. is having controlling the border. Here's what they said. Apparently, the U.S. is having as little success in keeping the Mexicans out of Azatlan. Azatlan is the country they describe, which is the U.S. states taken from Mexico in 1848, Arizona, California, New Mexico, parts of Utah, Colorado, and so on, as Mexico had when they tried to keep North Americans out of Texas in 1830. The Latinos are now realizing that the power to control Azatlan may once again be in their hands. That's what they're teaching the kids.
They're talking about revolution, by the way.
Yeah, and then they teach stereotypes. They have a chart where there's a line down the middle. On the white side is whiteness, and on the other side is people of color. And on the whiteness side, they have all negative traits, like they say, whites interrupt more than other people. I don't know if you do. I mean, you're white. Do you interrupt more than other people? I don't think so.
Depends.
It's primitive racism and stereotyping, and they. My youngest son at the University of Arizona, he was required to take a diversity class, and the teacher was African American, and he taught the kids that white people are only in it for themselves, and people of color are all brothers. That was the kind of thing they were teaching. We have to teach the kids. I'm sorry, I almost banged your table, but I avoided it.
It was good.
We have to teach the kids to treat each other as individuals. Race is completely irrelevant in judging another person.
That is going to be difficult to start from the beginning because you're already facing a situation where race is important, where you have a school system teaching people how important being a person of color is as opposed to white. They're actually anti-white in a school system.
Yeah, and it's bad for everybody. It's bad for everybody. You can't treat people on the basis of their race. I want to tell you about a Hispanic teacher at one time at Tucson Unified District who was born in Mexico, and he was an excellent English teacher. Everyone said he was a very academic English course. And he opposed bilingual education. So the director of the La Raza Studies program, the ethnic studies program I told you about, called him the white man's agent. And when this director was a teacher, he taught a separatist political agenda. His students told Ayala that they were taught in Raza Studies to not fall for the white man's traps. That's what they were learning. Another teacher wrote to me, all my sources when I destroyed this program were teachers who saw what was going on. He told me he heard students being told that they need to go to college so they can gain power to take back the stolen land and return it to Mexico.
All right. You're elected superintendent of public instruction.
Yes.
These are things that have all been bred now for a number of years. Where do you start? How do you start? What do you do? Okay,
well, I started to say earlier there are two paths to take. One is to get the legislature to pass a bill and enforce the bill to put a stop to this. The other is if you can't get a bill, and the bill that passed this year is very weak. It's not worth the paper it's written on, really. The second way to do it is to say this kind of teaching is unprofessional, and the superintendent, along with the state board, have disciplinary power over teachers. When I was a student, no teacher would tell you what political party they belonged to. They had to be completely objective, teach both sides of issues, teach kids critical thinking. Now these teachers think that their captive classroom is a time to push their political philosophy on the kids in their class. And that, in my opinion, is unprofessional, and they should be disciplined, and if they keep at it, I think they should have their certificate to teach taken away from them.
How do you say you can no longer teach your political opinion? Do you just say it that way?
You say that when you teach controversial issues, you have to present both sides. I'm in favor of teaching controversial issues. That's a good way to teach kids to think. But you have to give equal time to both sides. Now, when that was...
If it's a math class, teach math.
Yeah, if it's a math class, teach math, I agree. But if you're talking about in history or civics or English even, you can teach critical issues. I mean, the best course I've ever taken, including when I was at Harvard, was in high school, a history course, where we read something called the Amherst series, which were books that had essays giving different views of the same issue. The Turner theory of the frontier, or the Beard theory of the Constitution being based on economics, or whatever it was. We read essays contradicting each other, and we learned critical thinking. That's what we have to bring back, and not use the classroom as a captive audience for these left-wing teachers to push their propaganda.
Must there be a way to teach young people the importance of the Constitution?
Absolutely, and I believe it has to be part of history. Because if you try to teach civics separately, it can be boring for the kids. But history is a narrative. It can be exciting stories. And in the context of history, you can teach kids what is in the Constitution and how our system works, how many branches of government we have, and so on. Not in the abstract, we have 3 branches of government and all that. As a part of a history narrative, learning how these things developed, a good history teacher makes it exciting because of the narrative.
Our guest, Tom Horne. Tom is a candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. He will be a great superintendent. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Tom. Good night, everyone. See you next week. Mark Fincham will be our guest next week.